With the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the soon-to-be established DC Universe, it's hard not to be excited if you're a fan of stories about superheroes. After all, comic book readers were finally able to get their breakthrough into mainstream culture, and now more and more characters which would typically be overshadowed by the likes of Superman, Batman and Spider-Man will get to see their big screen debuts. However, if you're living in Japan, chances are you're not getting exposed to that culture the same way people in the West are. Late releases like the one for Deadpool, which will premiere sometime in June, or controversies surrounding movie posters with taglines like Nihon no kore ga eiga da, that translate to "Hey Japan, this is a movie," are just effects of a phenomenon that has been evolving for the last 50 years: the overwhelming popularity of anime. It is a well-known fact that anime and manga have been rooted deep into Japanese society. Some historians would even argue that the true beginning can be traced all the way back to the Edo period. However, the mainstream impact was felt much later, and one of the key titles that started it all was Tetsuwan Atom, or Astro Boy as it is known in the West. It was influenced by Superman in the way that both him and Astro Boy have similar powers. And if you were to delve deeper in their origin stories, you'd find out that their moral values and knowledge about good and evil are centered around the fact that neither one of them is actually human, but it is worth sacrificing themselves to preserve humanity and what the good in it stands for. With the original release of Astro Boy on the small screen in 1963, began a movement in Japanese culture that eventually led to the anime industry producing around 60% of the world's animation. But it wasn't until the late 80s and mid 90s that the medium finally became popular to foreigners. Around that time, the heavily influenced anime completed the circle, with mainstream productions in the West borrowing ideas and even entire stories and characters. Movies like Akira and the original Ghost in the Shell are regarded as classics and influenced generations of young people and movie makers, whereas series like Fullmetal Alchemist helped to establish Japanese animation as a serious form of art with enticing characters and deeply meaningful stories. Despite having common themes, however, Japan and America stand on entirely different sides of the spectrum when it comes to superheroes. On one hand, you have the almost deified characters with astonishing powers that represent a genre. Superheroes that are grounded within the current events and throughout their history of publication have continued expanding their universes by bringing more and more stories to the table. What defines the American take on superheroes is the fact that they share the same world as we do, and most importantly, share it with each other. This link allows for the defenders of justice to be normal in a world much like ours, but where powers and mutations also exist. Superheroes don't feel like an isolated phenomenon, but become an integral part of society, something on which people can rely on with the same certainty as their knowledge of gravity. On the other hand, we have the Japanese take on beings with otherworldly abilities. They feel much more isolated and self-contained within their own universes, or in many cases the boundaries of fictional or real cities in Japan. This allows writers to escape the constraints of our physical world in whatever creative way they see fit, and tackle ideas that would be really hard to put into perspective if the story was taking place on 21st century Earth. Also, because of the fact that most mangas don't share the same universe, it's hard to point out to central figures that could be defined as superheroes. We have unimaginably powerful beings like Goku and Luffy, but their powers don't feel impossible to attain. Where we live, people flying or regenerating extremely fast is considered a fantasy. In the realm of anime, that's something that protagonists come to accept as normal. However, there is one title that effortlessly shatters the well-established norms. The character of Saitama and the megalopolis he inhabits are such that they manage to glorify and satirize superheroes in both Japan and America at the same time. With that, One Punch Man attained an almost instantaneous cult classic status. He manages to embody all the familiar features we love from both sides and also elevates them to something completely new. But let's start from the top. In American comics, origin stories play out to be one of the centerpieces of their publication, so much so that there are often separate series dedicated to explaining how a character obtains his powers and what makes him use them for good. Superheroes face day-to-day challenges, which put their resolve and ingenuity rather than their abilities to the test. This places the reader in the character's shoes and asks him, will you save a loved one, but doom the rest of the world? In mangas, however, the attention falls on evolving the powers of the hero so that he could fight off a greater evil. Through sheer determination and force of will, characters are able to keep up and protect their loved ones. But it's always with the help and support of people around them that they are able to overcome their limitations. That places the focus on team effort and allows us to be more involved with the current story rather than the events that preceded. If you look at One Punch Man, Genos and Boros also undergo transformations to become stronger and reach their full potential, but Saitama doesn't. His power level is a constant in the sense that whoever he faces, he will always be able to win with a single punch. This is designed to poke fun at recurring anime tropes in shonen anime, where fights usually take hours of screen time to reach their conclusion, with the most glaring example being the fight between Goku and Frieza on the planet Namek, where it took 9 episodes for the planet to blow up when Frieza clearly stated,
5 minutes.
At the same time, his overwhelming power level puts Saitama in a strange situation. There is essentially no real challenge for him except the mundane chores he has to do on a day-to-day basis, like watering his plant or picking up groceries. After fulfilling his childhood dreams of becoming a hero who can defeat his opponents with a single punch, there doesn't seem to be anything that could be used as a motivation to drive the character forward. Saitama seems distant and appears to not pay much attention to anything. He states on numerous occasions that he is simply a hero as a hobby. Here lies an interesting fact. Saitama's personality is also a constant. The challenges he faces don't impact him, but what does change is the perspective of the reader. Instead of going through a huge number of pages to evolve the character, the writer who named himself One simply shines the light to whatever trait will move the plot forward. And since the character is loosely based on its creator, One Punch Man acts as an introspective, a personal exploration story within the confines of a fictional world. Japan's youth in recent years has faced extreme issues with depression and rejection from the public. Conditions like hikikomori, the withdrawal from social life to the point of extreme, are a very real threat to both the economy and society. Faced with the often insane expectations of their families and peers, and the inability to follow their dreams, Japanese youngsters crumble under the pressure and more often than not, completely disappear from the face of the world. Saitama was very close to reaching that point as well, and as an evidence we could look at his meeting with the monster Crablante. Instead of being minced to pieces, the young man is spared because his eyes are lifeless after failing his third job interview. Much like his creator, One, whose hobby of drawing manga was rejected by his family, Saitama is also cast out from society. He doesn't willingly shut himself out. Instead, his efforts become completely unrecognized.
今までたくさん怪人だの悪の軍団だのを退治してきた。他のヒーローが俺くらい活躍をしてる現場なんて見たことがない。もはや誰もが知ってていいんじゃないか。もっとファンとかいても不自然じゃないだろう。今日なんて言われたと思う？お前など知らん。だってよ。
Arguably the two most powerful beings to ever come out of publication are Superman and Goku. Both of them closely resemble ordinary humans, and yet they are surrounded by an aura of divinity. Unlike them, Saitama feels less like a god and more like an ordinary person. In a world where ordinary people are just victims of those with power, One Punch Man is able to become the ultimate defender of men, not by receiving his abilities or being born with them, but by following his dreams and remaining human. What truly makes Saitama unique and relatable is his ability to remain a constant. Saitama is Saitama and he will always be One Punch Man. He does not use disguise, it's just who he is.